There are action stars. And then there is Jean-Claude Van Damme. The name alone conjures images of split kicks, blood-stained arenas, and a stare so intense it could break bones before a single punch is thrown. In the golden era of 80s and 90s action cinema, he wasn't just a part of the genre, he redefined it. He was elegance in motion, rage in silence. The muscles from Brussels whose body spoke a language no accent ever could. But behind every slow-motion spin kick was a story the camera never captured. Behind every standing ovation was a silence that followed him home. Behind every $1,000,000 paycheck was a price no man should pay. Jean-Claude Van Damme wasn't born into greatness. He was carved from rejection, stitched together by hunger, heartbreak, and discipline so brutal it broke others long before it made him. He came from Belgium with a dream no one believed in but him, a dream born in a mirror, raised in a dojo, and baptized on the grimy streets of Los Angeles, where hunger hit harder than any opponent he'd ever face in the ring. This isn't just the story of a martial artist, or a movie star, or a man who made the world believe he could kick his way through any obstacle. This is the story of a fighter who lost everything again and again, and still found a way to rise from the cold silence of a church in Brussels, to the blinding lights of Hollywood, to the quiet regret of a father haunted by absence, to the trembling strength of a man clawing his way back from addiction, from madness, from the edge of the abyss. This is Jean-Claude Van Damme, raw, broken, and undefeated. Because the greatest battles are not fought on screen. They are fought in silence. If you still believe in heroes, real ones, not the kind with capes or CGI muscles, but the ones who bleed, who fail, who fall and rise again, then keep watching. Because the story you're about to hear will shake your soul. The legend is real, and it begins long before Hollywood ever learned his name, before he was the muscles from Brussels, before the world watched him shatter bones on screen. Jean-Claude Van Damme was just a fragile boy staring at his reflection and hating what he saw. He was born Jean-Claude Camille Francois Van Varenberg on October 18, 1960, in Berchem-Saint-Agathe, a sleepy commune on the western edge of Brussels, Belgium. His father, Eugene Van Varenberg, was a strict accountant. His mother, Eliana, a florist who brought beauty into their small home, raised him alongside his sister Veronique. On paper, their life looked unremarkable, modest, structured, safe. But inside that quiet home, a storm was brewing. Jean-Claude was no playground warrior. He wasn't the kid picked first. In fact, he was the kid picked last, if picked at all. He was thin, timid, pale, and worst of all, in the unforgiving eyes of children. He wore thick glasses that magnified his insecurity. The kids at school called him names. Four Eyes, Twig Boy, Weakling. Laughter followed him through the corridors. Every glance felt like a spotlight on his shame, but the mirror was worse than any bully. It showed him exactly who he was, and more painfully, who he wasn't. He was 11 years old when he stood in front of that mirror, shirtless, shaking, and whispered a vow to himself. This will change. I will change. I will never feel small again. That moment, quiet and unseen, would ignite a transformation that would one day shake Hollywood to its core. His father saw something boiling under his son's silence, a hidden fire. So he enrolled Jean-Claude at the Centre National de Karate and Excels under the unforgiving eye of Master Claude Getz. It was there, inside that brutal dojo. That discipline became his second skin. Jean-Claude trained every single day. No breaks, no excuses. While other boys were chasing girls or kicking soccer balls, he was perfecting form, learning to master his body, silencing the doubt that still echoed in his mind. By age 18, he had earned a black belt in Shotokan karate. He joined Belgium's national karate team, standing side by side with men twice his size and holding his own. It wasn't just physical strength he built. It was focus, control, and armor against the world that once laughed at him. But karate wasn't enough. What came next shocked everyone. Jean-Claude, the kid who once feared being mocked, enrolled in ballet. 5 years. Every day. Bar work, stretches, leaps, precision, all under the grueling expectations of perfection. The same kids who once mocked his glasses now couldn't understand why he chose dance. But Van Damme knew something they didn't. Ballet is the hardest thing I've ever done, he would later confess. If you can survive a ballet workout, you can survive anything. And survive he did. The ballet taught him balance, poise, and fluidity, traits that would one day make his fight scenes legendary. But he wasn't done reshaping himself. His final transformation came through bodybuilding. He lifted, ate clean, trained like his life depended on it, because in his mind, it did. The skinny boy with glasses became a chiseled machine. In 1978, at just 18 years old, he won Mr. Belgium, a title that confirmed what he already knew. He was no longer weak. Still, none of this was about trophies. It was about reclaiming power, about being seen, about becoming the hero he once dreamed of, not for others, but for himself. And then, one night, in a dark Belgian church, he made a quiet wish, not for fame, not for money, but for 3 things: to save the world, to protect nature, and to become a movie star. To most, it would sound naive. But to Jean-Claude, who had known only ridicule, silence, and shame, these were not fantasies. They were lifelines. And he clung to them. Karate had given him control. Ballet had given him grace. Bodybuilding had given him strength. But it was faith that gave him a vision. And so, with a body built from pain, a dream born in fire, and a spirit forged in solitude, Jean-Claude Van Damme was ready to leave everything behind. He didn't yet know it, but he was already walking into his greatest battle, not on a movie set, but on the streets of America, where his past would be his only weapon. In 1982, Jean-Claude Van Damme turned his back on everything he knew, family, home, safety, and boarded a plane with nothing but $3,000, a thick accent, and a dream so heavy it nearly broke him. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing recognition, a chance to matter in a world that had tried to erase him. He left behind his first wife, Maria Rodriguez, not because he stopped loving her, but because his dream didn't have space for 2 passengers. It was selfish. It was tragic. But it was inevitable. When he landed in Los Angeles, Hollywood felt light years away. He wasn't a name. He wasn't even a face. He was just another foreigner nobody cared about, drifting through a city obsessed with fame, but deaf to desperation. The apartment he dreamed of never came. The acting jobs vanished into silence. He spent his nights sleeping in the back seat of a beat-up car, the windows fogged by his breath, his stomach twisting with hunger, so sharp it felt like punishment. He would curl into himself just to stay warm, using his gym bag as a pillow, his dream as a blanket. And when even the coins in his pocket disappeared, he stole food, an apple from a cart, a sandwich from a counter, not because he wanted to, but because his body was shutting down. He was starving. Literally, I had to survive, he later admitted. It was not about pride. It was about not dying. During the day, he walked the pavement of Sunset Boulevard, auditioning at casting agencies and studios. He knocked on doors, left headshots, begged for roles, but every door closed. Again and again and again, they laughed at his accent, scoffed at his name. Some didn't even let him finish his sentence. Others handed him a fake smile and a cruel goodbye. In total, he faced more than 100 rejections. Every no was a punch. Every silence felt like a verdict. You'll never belong here. He was mocked in Belgium for being too weak. Now he was mocked in America for being too foreign. And yet, he never missed a training day. Every morning, Jean-Claude would stretch in public parks. He would perform splits between railings, balancing on muscle and willpower alone. Tourists and strangers thought he was mad. But to him, it was faith in motion. All I had, he said, was my body. And I had to make it speak, to survive. He took any job he could find. Pizza delivery driver, running slices to strangers who had no idea they were tipping a future icon. Limo driver, opening doors for Hollywood elites who wouldn't even glance at him. Parquet floor installer, sanding hardwood while daydreaming of film sets. Karate instructor, teaching kicks in parking lots just to make a few bucks. And most ironically, he worked as a bouncer at Woody's Wharf, a bar owned by none other than Chuck Norris himself. Imagine it, a man who would one day headline blockbusters, standing by the door checking IDs for strangers who barely noticed him. Life is cruel that way. It tests your pride before it rewards your patience. But Van Damme never broke. Every night he returned to that car, to that silence, to that hunger. And every morning he whispered the same words. Thank you in advance for my success. It sounds ridiculous, delusional even, but it was his mantra, his prayer, his armor. When the world offered him nothing, he gave himself hope. And then, a flicker. In 1984, he appeared as a background dancer in Break-In, a breakdance movie that barely noticed him. But he left his mark, a lightning-fast split that most viewers blinked past. That same year, he got a minor job on the stunt team for Missing in Action, a Chuck Norris film. The pay was terrible, the recognition non-existent. But for Jean-Claude, it was oxygen. He was getting closer. In 1986, he finally landed his first speaking role, Even the Russian, in No Retreat, No Surrender. It was low budget. It was cheesy. But it gave him a name, a close-up, a credit. He was on screen. After years of darkness, anyone saw him. These weren't the glamorous years. They were the grind years, the ones built on humiliation, hunger, and raw pain. But here's the truth. Those years made him, because from the shattered pieces of that car seat, from every rejection, every skipped meal, every cruel smirk from a casting director who never gave him a chance, Jean-Claude Van Damme was building something stronger than fame. He was building a story the world could never forget. And soon, that story would explode onto screens in a way no one could predict. Boy from Brussels was about to become a myth. It was 1988. The sun hadn't risen on Jean-Claude Van Damme's career until it exploded in a storm of fists, sweat, and cinematic vengeance. Bloodsport, a low-budget film with a modest $1.5 million budget. It was supposed to be forgettable. Just another straight-to-video martial arts flick, doomed to fade into obscurity like so many before it. The studio didn't even want to release it. But when audiences got a taste of Van Damme as Frank Dux, the underground fighter competing in the brutal, no rules, Kumite, they couldn't look away. He didn't just fight. He flowed. He didn't just win. He bled for it. His legendary slow-motion split kick. The intensity in his eyes. The agony in his primal screams. It was something raw. Something real. Bloodsport wasn't just a martial arts movie. It was a revolution. It introduced the world to a new kind of hero. Not a massive, muscle-bound tank like Schwarzenegger. Not a streetwise cop like Stallone. But something else entirely. A graceful warrior. Fast, flexible, ferocious. When the credits rolled and the lights came up, a new name was burned into the minds of millions. Jean-Claude Van Damme. The kid who once cried in a Belgian church now watched crowds rise to their feet. He would later confess, "When I saw Bloodsport in theaters, I cried." The little boy in Belgium had finally been seen, and the world couldn't get enough. Just 1 year later, Kickboxer hit the screen. Van Damme returned as Kurt Sloane, a man seeking revenge for his paralyzed brother. But this time, it wasn't just about the fighting. It was about emotion, pain, loyalty, heartbreak, honor. And then the dance. That infamous drunken, barefoot bar fight, hips swaying, arms flowing, beat pulsing through his veins before he exploded into a whirlwind of devastating kicks. It was ridiculous. It was legendary. It was Van Damme. With a box office take that ballooned to over $50 million, Kickboxer was no fluke. It was proof the muscles from Brussels had arrived. What followed was a relentless march to action superstardom. Lionheart, 1990, a French legionnaire turned underground fighter defending his family in America's illegal fight scene. Van Damme was brutal and compassionate, a man of fists and soul. Death Warrant, 1990. He went undercover in a violent prison. This wasn't fantasy. This was raw survival. Double Impact, 1991. Van Damme played twins, Alex and Chad, separated at birth, reunited for revenge. Two Van Dammes. Twice the rage. Twice the choreography. Twice the box office. By now, audiences didn't just love him. They were addicted to him. He was box office gold. Then came the Titan, Universal Soldier, 1992. Starring opposite Swedish powerhouse Dolph Lundgren, Van Damme portrayed Luke Devereaux, a reanimated super soldier trying to reclaim his humanity. The fight scenes were brutal. The tone was darker. But Van Damme's presence? Undeniable. The film grossed over $100 million worldwide. For the first time, he wasn't just a martial artist. He was a movie star on a global scale. Critics began paying attention. Studios leaned in. Audiences knew his name. But he wasn't done. In 1994, Jean-Claude Van Damme climbed even higher. A sci-fi thriller about a time-traveling federal agent battling crime across dimensions. It became his highest-grossing film to date, raking in more than $100 million globally. And for the first time, people saw more than just a fighter. They saw an actor. His role as Max Walker was layered with grief, vengeance, love, and loss. Behind the muscles was a man haunted by his wife's death, torn between justice and emotion. Van Damme didn't just jump through time. He stepped through a door, one that had been locked to martial artists before him. He wasn't just an action star anymore. He was Hollywood royalty. By the mid-1990s, Jean-Claude Van Damme had become one of the highest-paid action stars on the planet. He wasn't just living the dream. He was living several at once. Private jets, million-dollar homes, box office domination, studio heads begging for his name on a marquee. His face was on posters from Los Angeles to Tokyo, from Johannesburg to Sao Paulo. The boy who once whispered dreams in a Belgian church was now one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. But there was one thing fame didn't come with. Balance. As the world fell at his feet, his personal life began to crumble around him, quietly, then publicly, then explosively. Long before Hollywood knew his name, Van Damme had married Maria Rodriguez, a quiet woman from Belgium who offered him love, grounding, and a simple life. But in 1982, when Jean-Claude left for America with only $3,000 and an oversized dream, Maria stayed behind. Not because she wanted to, but because his dream had no room for detours. Their marriage dissolved Within a few years, no tabloids. No headlines. Just distance, loneliness, and the cold erosion of something once beautiful. Years later, he would admit, Maria was the first casualty of my ambition. In 1985, Van Damme married again, this time to Cynthia Dergerian, an American woman from a well-off family who brought stability and access to the Hollywood world he longed to conquer. From the outside, it looked perfect. The muscles from Brussels, once mocked for his broken English and outsider status, now had a Beverly Hills address, a beautiful wife, and movie deals in motion. But the fire that burned inside him, the obsession, wouldn't dim. Acting came first. Training came first. Fame came first. Cynthia would later say, living with Jean-Claude was hell, because he only loved himself. Their marriage lasted less than a year. Another woman left in the wake of his rising stardom. Another warning he ignored. Then came a love that seemed different. In 1987, Jean-Claude married Gladys Portugues, a former professional bodybuilder and fitness icon. She was strong in spirit and body, and for a moment, it looked like the fighter had found his match. That same year, their son Christopher was born. 3 years later, on Van Damme's birthday, they welcomed their daughter, Bianca. To the public, it was picture perfect. The action star had finally found a woman who understood his discipline, his pain, his pace. They were on the cover of fitness magazines, red carpets, talk shows, but reality was far more fragile. Van Damme's schedule was merciless, hopping from country to country, film to film. One shoot ended, another began. He was making $5 million, $8 million, even $10 million a movie, but he was losing what mattered most. Time with his family. He started showing up late. Then he didn't show up at all. Nights blurred into parties. Rumors of infidelity bubbled. Champagne flowed more freely than apologies. Gladys, the woman who once stood proudly beside him, found herself standing alone. In 1992, they divorced. And for the first time, Van Damme saw what it meant to lose not just a wife, but his children. He watched them grow from a distance, missing milestones, missing birthdays, missing hugs. Fame had made him global, but it had made him absent at home. They were laughing without me, he once whispered, and I knew I had no one to blame but myself. In 1994, Van Damme married for the 4th time to Darcy Lepier, a former Miss Hawaiian actress who radiated elegance and optimism. They married under tropical skies in Bangkok, in between shoots for Street Fighter. It felt like a fresh start, a new chapter, a second chance. In 1995, their son Nicholas was born. For Van Damme, this was supposed to be redemption, his chance to get it right. But Hollywood never stopped spinning. The red carpets, the endorsements, the late nights, the new temptations. They kept pulling him away. And Van Damme kept answering their call. Soon, tabloid rumors exploded. An alleged affair with Kylie Minogue during the Street Fighter shoot. Whispers of a fling with model Isabelle Fortier. Nights at hotels. Calls that went unanswered. Absences that turned into betrayals. Darcy was young, proud, and furious. She filed for divorce in 1997. But the real pain came not from the split, but from what came after. Custody. Van Damme was stripped of access to his son. Not legally forever, but emotionally overnight. He went from hearing his baby's laugh to hearing nothing, not seeing my son. It broke me, he later said, tears in his voice. I've been through fights, poverty, addiction, but nothing compares to that. The man who once split his legs between trucks, who shattered bricks and bent steel, could not break through the wall between him and his child. And worse, he knew he had built that wall himself. 4 marriages. 4 heartbreaks. 2 families split. One son he couldn't see. The same discipline that built his body, the same fire that fueled his fight scenes, was now the very thing destroying his home. He gave everything to his dream. But it took more than money. It took birthdays, bedtime stories, soft moments. It took love. And yet, Jean-Claude didn't stop. He couldn't. He kept filming, kept performing, kept smiling through it all. But beneath the surface, the man who once fought for his dream now had to face the cost. He had become a stranger to the very people who needed him most. And with that silence came a new shadow, one that didn't just ruin marriages. It threatened to ruin everything. Because when love walks out the door, sometimes the only thing left waiting in the hallway is addiction. By the late 1990s, Jean-Claude Van Damme had it all. And yet, he was falling apart. His body, once sculpted from obsession, began to rot under the weight of excess. His mind, once sharp with discipline, blurred beneath a fog of chemicals. His name, once celebrated on every continent, was now whispered in disappointment. The world didn't see it coming. But Jean-Claude did. He felt it, every minute of it. Because while fans cheered the explosions on screen, behind the scenes, Van Damme was staring into a far deadlier fight, the fight for his own survival. The whispers had begun years earlier, stories of erratic behavior, mood swings, late-night disappearances on set. But by the mid-90s, the whispers became headlines. Jean-Claude Van Damme was addicted to cocaine, not casually, not occasionally. He later confessed to using up to 10 grams a day. To put that into perspective, that's enough to kill most people. He was staying up for days, training, then crashing, shooting scenes while wired, then vanishing into the night. He thought he was unstoppable, but addiction doesn't fight fair. I thought I was invincible, he admitted, but I was losing myself, and I didn't even realize it. His once perfect body, the envy of an entire generation, began to betray him. Sleeplessness turned his muscles soft. His eyes lost their sharpness. He was still performing splits, still punching through doors, but behind the screen, he was shattering. On the set of Street Fighter, it all came crashing down. He was the lead, the hero, the face of the film. But Van Damme would vanish from set for days at a time. Production stalled. Budgets inflated. Directors panicked. The movie made money, mostly from overseas markets, but the damage behind the scenes was catastrophic. And everyone knew why. Hollywood doesn't forgive delays. It doesn't forget liability. And Jean-Claude Van Damme had become both. As his personal life unraveled, the courts came calling. In one case, stuntman Jackson Rock Pinkney was accidentally injured during filming and lost an eye. Van Damme was ordered to pay nearly $500,000, but money was no longer the problem. Reputation was. Then came the lawsuit from Frank Dux, the real-life martial artist whose story had inspired Bloodsport. Dux accused Van Damme of stealing his script idea for a sequel. Although Van Damme eventually won the case, the courtroom spectacle painted a damning picture. A hero caught in greed, arrogance, and betrayal. It wasn't just the tabloids fueling the flames. Hollywood turned cold. Studios that once paid him $8 to $10 million per film now ghosted him. Insurance companies refused to back him. Directors whispered that he was unreliable, volatile, a risk. He went from commanding $20 million per picture, rivaling Jim Carrey at his peak, to being blacklisted by major studios. Not just replaced. Erased. One night in 1997, Van Damme walked into a New York bar. The details are fuzzy. Some say it was a misunderstanding. Others say it was ego. What isn't up for debate is this: he got into a fight and lost. A man who had felled villains on screen for a decade, who kicked through steel, cracked jaws in slow motion, and stood undefeated in every film, was knocked out cold by actor and biker Chuck Zito in front of witnesses. And just like that, the myth cracked. The world laughed. The press had a field day. The indestructible Jean-Claude Van Damme had just been flattened, not by a co-star, not by a villain, but by real life. It was the kind of humiliation money couldn't cover. It was the kind of moment that follows you for years. By 1999, the spiral was complete. Police lights flashed in the dead of night. Van Damme was pulled over and arrested for DUI. He didn't look like a movie star anymore. He looked lost. Hollow. His mugshot replaced movie posters. There was no stuntman, no music, no edits. Just a broken man staring into a lens, realizing what he'd become. The media tore him apart, but it wasn't the headlines that hurt him the most. It was what came after. Silence. The offers stopped. The calls stopped. The fans went quiet. And Hollywood, the same beast he once bled for, closed its doors without a word. The boy from Brussels had made it to the mountaintop, only to realize he was alone, addicted, ashamed, and slipping. Alone in a Hong Kong hotel room, Van Damme sat by the window. Outside, the city pulsed with neon life. Inside, he stared into nothing. Years later, he would reveal something that shocked even his closest fans. I thought about ending it. Not in passing. Not traumatically. Genuinely. After all the muscles, all the millions, all the trophies. He had arrived at the one question no hero wants to face. If I disappear now, will anyone still care? The silence answered. But he didn't pull the trigger. He didn't step off the ledge. He didn't surrender, because somewhere, buried under addiction, under shame, under pain, there was still a flicker of fire, a spark, a memory, a voice that whispered back from his past. You are not done yet. By the end of the 1990s, Jean-Claude Van Damme wasn't just broken. He was disoriented, spinning through a storm of emotions, decisions, and addictions he could no longer control. One moment, he was invincible, training for 20 hours straight, writing scripts in bursts of brilliance, convinced he could direct, star, and produce his own films back-to-back without sleep. The next, he was barely able to get out of bed. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't weak. He was sick. And finally, after years of silent suffering, someone gave the pain a name. Bipolar disorder. For years, Jean-Claude had lived in extremes. Manic highs where he felt godlike, hyper-productive, euphoric, unstoppable. Crippling lows where he couldn't move, couldn't feel, couldn't think without drowning in shame. His addiction wasn't just a moral failure. It was a way to numb the cycles. Cocaine became his escape from the depressive valleys. Fame fed the manic peaks, but nothing lasted. Not the highs, not the cheers, not the people. And now, the puzzle pieces finally made sense. They thought he was done. The world had moved on to younger stars, shinier heroes, cleaner reputations. The age of slow-motion split kicks was over. Jean-Claude Van Damme had been mocked, memed, and forgotten by many. But legends don't disappear. They wait. They learn. And when the time is right, they return. In 2008, after nearly a decade in the shadows, Van Damme stepped back into the spotlight. But this time, not as a hero, not as a fighter, not even as a legend. He stepped forward as a man. The movie was called JCVD, and it changed everything. From the opening shot, it was clear. This wasn't a comeback. It was a confession. JCVD was not an action film in the traditional sense. It was a meta-drama, a story about Jean-Claude Van Damme playing himself. A washed-up actor caught in a post office heist, forced to relive every regret, every loss, every mistake. In real time, it could have been awkward, cheesy, desperate, Instead, it was breathtaking. And then came the monologue, 6 minutes long. One unbroken shot. Van Damme looks straight into the camera and breaks down. He confesses everything. The fame, the drugs, the divorces, the betrayal of his children, the lies he told himself, the man he failed to be. It wasn't acting. It was truth. And for the first time in his career, Jean-Claude Van Damme didn't hide behind a fight scene or a script or a spotlight. He stood naked in front of the world, emotionally, spiritually, soulfully naked. And the world wept with him. Critics hailed the film. Fans praised his courage. Time magazine called his performance Oscar-worthy. But more importantly, he proved something no action hero ever had, that real strength isn't in your fists. It's in your ability to say, I was wrong. 5 years later, in 2013, Van Damme was 53 years old. Most stars at that age are chasing endorsement deals, coasting on nostalgia, or settling into retirement. But not Jean-Claude. He signed up for a Volvo commercial. A simple ad to show off the precision of their trucks, dynamic steering. But what he did next broke the internet. 2 Volvo trucks, driving backward, side by side. Van Damme, suspended between them, his feet on their side mirrors. And then, as Enya's Only Time played, the trucks slowly drifted apart. He performed a perfect split. At 5-3 on moving vehicles. On the open road. In one silent, jaw-dropping shot, he reminded the world who he was. And the world responded. The commercial racked up over 100 million views in weeks. It became one of the most viral ads in history. Parodies followed. Memes exploded. But behind every joke was respect. Jean-Claude Van Damme wasn't just back. He was beyond back. He was immortal again. With the success of JCVD and the viral split, Hollywood came calling again. In 2009, he returned to the franchise that had made him a global icon with Universal Soldier. Regeneration, darker, grittier, and more brutal than ever before. Then came Universal Soldier, Day of Reckoning, 2012. A surreal, violent film that pushed boundaries and proved Van Damme could still surprise you, even after decades in the game. That same year, he joined Sylvester Stallone, Jason Statham, Jet Li, Chuck Norris, and Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Expendables 2. But Van Damme didn't just show up. He stole the show. As the villainous Jean Villain. He brought menace, elegance, and charm. His final showdown with Stallone reminded audiences that Van Damme didn't just belong in this lineup. He elevated it. Critics whispered, Van Damme never left. We just stopped looking. Then in 2016, Amazon released Jean-Claude Van Johnson, a brilliant, self-aware action comedy series in which Van Damme played, well, himself again, a retired action star who's actually a secret agent. It was satire. It was smart. It was hilarious. And it was humble. He was laughing at his own myth and inviting you to laugh with him. That's not ego. That's growth. In the years following his resurrection, honors came in waves. A bronze statue of Van Damme was erected in Brussels, his hometown, honoring his global impact. Streets in Europe and Asia were renamed after him. Film festivals celebrated his legacy. Martial artists referenced him as the bridge between Bruce Lee and modern cinema. But for Jean-Claude, the recognition wasn't the reward. The real reward was peace. Peace of mind. Peace with his past. Peace with the people he had once hurt. He wasn't chasing cameras anymore. He was chasing clarity. And for the first time, he was catching it. This wasn't a Hollywood redemption arc. This wasn't a PR stunt or a career Hail Mary. This was a man reclaiming himself. He had once been devoured by ambition. Now he was sustained by purpose. He had once trained to become hero. Now he trained to stay alive. He had once kicked through doors. Now he opened them. For others walking similar roads. His splits didn't defy age. They defined it. At 53. He did what 23-year-olds couldn't, not just physically, but spiritually, because he had something no young star could manufacture: perspective. When the doctor told me I was bipolar, he said later, I cried. Not because I was broken, but because I finally understood. For decades, he had fought an invisible opponent. A war no roundhouse kick could land on. A pain no audience could see. He wasn't just battling Hollywood. He was battling his own brain. There were no inspirational soundtracks. No quick fixes, just therapy, medication, and the painful excavation of wounds he'd buried under scripts, muscle, and fame. He began taking mood stabilizers, carefully monitored by doctors. It was a delicate balance. Too much dulled his fire. Too little risked relapse. But for the first time, he chose discipline not to impress, but to survive. Then came the return to the only thing that had ever saved him: training. Karate, ballet, bodybuilding. The same trinity that transformed a shy Belgian boy into an international icon now became his lifeline. But this time, it wasn't for the camera. It was for the mirror. Every stretch, every sweat-soaked session, every slow, painful split was a silent scream. I'm still here. Recovery was not linear. There were relapses. Nights of shaking. Mornings of doubt. He alienated people. Disappointed those who still believed in him. But step by step, he fought back. He replaced cocaine with clean nutrition. He replaced toxic silence with honest conversation. He replaced chaos with structure. Without discipline, he said, I wouldn't have survived. He learned to respect his mind the way he had once worshipped his muscles. He trained not to be admired, but to heal. For the first time in his adult life, Jean-Claude Van Damme chose to stop performing and start listening to doctors, to his children, to his own broken heart. When most stars fall from grace, they vanish. But not Van Damme. Instead of hiding his diagnosis, he did something few celebrities dared to do in the early 2000s. He told the world. He spoke publicly about his bipolar disorder, about the addiction that nearly killed him, and about the darkness that lived behind the splits and the smirk. And in doing so, he transformed again, from icon to advocate. From fighter to witness. From legend to human being. For years, fans had worshipped the muscles, the kicks, the glory. But now, they saw something else: vulnerability. He wasn't just the guy from Bloodsport anymore. He was a man who had lost everything and chose to fight back. And for many, that was more powerful than any film. Men who had stayed silent about their own mental health. Parents of teens struggling with depression. Former addicts clinging to recovery. They saw themselves in Van Damme's story, and more importantly, they saw hope. You can be broken, he told them, and still come back stronger. He had once kicked through glass windows. Now he was breaking stigma. And that takes more strength than any spin kick ever could. By the early 2000s, Van Damme was clean, medicated, stable. He hadn't beaten bipolar disorder, because you don't beat it. You live with it. You manage it. You respect it. And he was doing just that. Slowly, Hollywood began to whisper his name again. Not with the roar of the 90s, but with something better. Curiosity. Could the fallen hero rise again? Could the man who'd once ruled the box office still find his place in the world? The answer wasn't in a headline, or a contract, or a viral clip. It was in his heartbeat, still pounding, still fighting, still here. Of all the victories Jean-Claude Van Damme claimed in his lifetime, the black belts, the box office hits, the statues cast in bronze, perhaps none mattered more than the one he never saw coming: the return of a woman he had once broken, but who never truly left his heart. Gladys Portuguese.